The game of yield farming has changed from how it was 4, 3, or even 2 years ago. In today's video, I'm going to break down how you can actually make money from yield farming in 2025 by doing it the right way. Now let's get into it. To start, if you want to be successful with yield farming in 2025, you need to recognize that it's a different game than it was in 2021. And if you were around then and maybe you took a few years off crypto, or you've been in crypto that entire time, then if you try to use the same strategies that worked then, now it's just not going to work. And the reason why is that back then, yield farming in DeFi was much more of a meta with widespread appeal. And what I mean by that is you had tens of thousands, honestly, probably hundreds of thousands or millions of people who were aping into these new DeFi farms. And so you would have a farm launch and it would have 1,000% APY for the first day, then it would get diluted and then more people would come in. And if you were around then, this should sound familiar to you. And so you were able to soak up these incentives early on and actually make serious returns quickly. That way you were able to put your money in and maybe make a quick 3, 4, 5, 10x. That's not how it works anymore. Reason is that those people who were in the past aping into yield farms, now instead they're buying meme coins, they're buying AI agents, they're buying Believe app, internet capital markets tokens, whatever the new narrative of the day is. Oftentimes it's been meme coins the past year. The people who would have been buying these new yield farms, instead they're doing that. Therefore, the opportunity to make a quick 10x, it's not in DeFi anymore, it's in these other things. And that's okay, because those things were always, you were always more likely to lose if you didn't actually have an edge. What is around though is DeFi protocols become much more mature, and you can actually use them to take digital assets that you want to hold anyways, and you can increase your yield by 10%, 15%, 20%, maybe even more in some cases. And so that's actually pretty powerful if you do it over a long period of time, because there's people who have been doing this since 2023. This is 2022. And as a result, say they were holding Bitcoin then, if they were able to secure a 5 to 10% yield for 3 or 4 years in a row, suddenly they're looking at having a substantially larger amount of actual Bitcoin, the asset they want to hold, than when they started. And the asset's also gone up in price. And you can do this for ETH, you can do this for Solana, you can do this for whatever kind of digital asset you want to hold. You can even do this for stable coins, or in some cases gold, because there's a lot of tokenized gold on chain now too. So in this video, I'm going to break down some strategies for actually earning yield on your digital assets. All right, so let's get into it. The main tool we're going to use in this video is going to be the DefiLlama Yields Dashboard. This tracks nearly 15,000 pools over 466 protocols on 106 chains. Not bad. Should be comprehensive enough that you can find what you're looking for. And you can filter it by token, you can filter it by chain, you can filter it by project, you can filter it by category. You can also filter by a selection of specific attributes. And in full disclosure, I am the head of growth for DefiLlama, so I have a affiliation with them. But let's talk about an example of using this dashboard. Say you were holding Bitcoin. You want to earn yield on Bitcoin. You can select all Bitcoins here, and this is going to show all the various wrapped versions of Bitcoin and all the pools that relate to them, of which there are a substantial amount. I'm not going to go all the way to the bottom. And there's a couple filters we want to do. So the first thing is, these top ones are just straight Bitcoin, but as you get down the list, you'll see, for example, Bitcoin USDC. Maybe that appeals to you, right? Maybe you're willing to swap half your Bitcoin to USDC and maybe suffer some impermanent loss for this higher yield. However, in a lot of cases, maybe you just want to hold Bitcoin. So the first attribute is we're going to do no IL. That means no impermanent loss. And what that means is that it's all going to be like assets. So for example, it's either just a single-sided pool or it's a pool like Wrap Bitcoin, Coinbase Wrap Bitcoin. So the yield is lower, but you don't have to worry about impermanent loss because you're just holding Bitcoin. Second thing, say we sorted by APY. We're going to see a lot of these pools like this, $10,000. Maybe that's good for you. There's not a lot of room for people to put any substantial amount of money in. There's certainly not more than a few people. So what I'm going to do also is filter to $1 million. And you could set a smaller TVL range, but I'm going to do $1 million. Then we sort by APY. Okay, so now we've got, and it looks like I accidentally unclicked this. So we're going to do that. There we go. So now we sort by APY, and now we've got everything's over $1 million, everything has no impermanent loss, and the APYs are necessarily more reasonable. However, remember, this is just on wrapped versions of Bitcoin. So now we're looking at APY that's at an upper end of 17%, far more that are in the 5 to 10% range. And then you would have to do all the usual due diligence you would want to do on these protocols. You would have to check whether it was audited. You'd have to check whether it had reputable backers and creators, whether it's been around for a while, whether it's got some lendiness. But in this way, you can actually pretty quickly find pools that you would be able to earn a decent amount on your Bitcoin for. By the way, if there's a filter you're using all the time on here, you can click on Save Current Filters to reference it anytime you want. So now we have this filter, we can click back onto it. And you could do this for other tokens as well, right? You could do this for ETH, stablecoins, etc. But that's the first way you could earn money with yield farming to boost those returns you'd want overall. The second way is you could take an ecosystem you're bullish on. For example, I've talked about Hyperliquid a number of times on this channel. The token has been doing very well recently. Maybe you hold some hype and maybe you want to try to boost those yields a little bit or put it to work in the ecosystem. And so you can do the same thing here by going through the ecosystem page. I'm still on DefiLlama here. It has a list of all the DeFi apps on this chain. However, what you can also do here is you can also look for tokenless protocols, and airdrop farming is really just a subset of yield farming. And so what we might do, for example, is go to Hyperlend, which you can see is up 250% in the past month, the TVLs, the deposits. But we could click through to Hyperlend, we could go to the app, and even though the yield on the market is relatively modest, we can see they have an ongoing points program. And points program doesn't always, but oftentimes means some kind of future airdrop. And so one way you might view this is you're basically deferring all your yield to a single point in the future. And although airdrop farming is not nearly as profitable or it's not as much of a meta as it used to be, insofar as there is an opportunity, and there have been in the past, it's usually when you have something like this, where it's a growing ecosystem, new money is coming into it, but there's a lot of major apps that don't have tokens yet, because those apps have fundamental reasons why you might be interested in accumulating that token beyond just someone's giving it to you, right? And so that's the second way that I would go about finding places to put my tokens to work. Also, if you want another way to find good yield farms, check out my newsletter, newsletter.dynamodefi.com, because every single week we send out a yield farm of the week for you, in addition to other cool stuff like tools, unlocks, on-chain analysis. Here, for example, is a aggregator we talked about last week where you could earn yield on ETH, Bitcoin, stablecoins, and Sol. And if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Dynamo DeFi.